We had this article from the Post Millennial. Biden's Surgeon General warns that 13-year-olds shouldn't use social media because they are still developing their identity. Chris Elston wrote, Vivek Murthy says he believes 13 is too young for children to be on social media platforms because kids are still developing their identity. What about puberty blockers, Vivek? So I think this shows the hypocrisy.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, clearly.
Really fully. Just straight out hypocrisy. Yeah, so you have Vivek Murthy saying that children should not be on social media because they're still developing their identities, but he would also tell you that girls who are minors should be able to get abortions without parental consent, and also that children should be able to determine their own gender identity.
So I'm sure, Jeff, you're familiar with the story of John Money?
Yeah, oh yes, absolutely.
Do you have concerns? I mean, obviously you have concerns for your children over this.
Yeah, I mean, the way I put it to the jury when I was put on the stand was very simple. I said, if my sons go with me, they have a chance at a normal life. If they go with her, they have no chance at a normal life and a good chance of living a life of despair. And that's the choice, that's the Hobson's choice that we're giving all of these children, right? And they're so obsessed with puberty blockers because the cure for gender dysphoria is called puberty. Puberty is the cure for gender dysphoria. Puberty is the process by which you come to identify with the social, psychological, and physical aspects of your sex. That's what puberty actually is. And so they desperately have to block puberty to maintain the gender dysphoria. Over 90% of these kids, if you just don't do anything, just grow into normal adults, small proportion of them become gay, and in line with the normal population, and then a small percentage of them continue to have problems.
This feels like, at least to a certain degree, some of this is experimentation. Like
definitely,
we know from the story of John Money and what he did to what was it, Brian and David? Were their
Brian
names?
and David.
They both ended up killing themselves in different ways.
Yes.
And it's a horror story. Now that story is particularly horrifying because John Money was forcing them to simulate adult activities on each other when they were very young children.
Yeah.
So for those that aren't familiar with the story, I think most people are, but if you're not, basically you had twins. I think they're identical twins. Were they?
They were identical.
Yeah, and there was a botched circumcision. So John Money convinced the parents, we'll raise one as a girl and one as a boy. And then I think almost immediately, it was Brian, or was it was David?
David.
David was the one who was made to live as a girl. David knew that he was actually male the whole time, and it caused great distress. So that's my fear. In that thinking, though, there is the argument made by the left that shows gender identity is inherent in the individual, and that if a child is born male but has a female identity or wants to identify socially as a female and you don't do it, you'll end up with that situation.
Well, I have a kind of an unusual take for someone on the right. I'm definitely on the right. And that I do think gender is in many ways socially constructed. And this always freaks people out, right? Like, well, how can you be a right winger and believe that? But
the social characteristics that we have built up around the biological sexes.
Correct, yeah. And in other words, you're born male, but you have to learn to be a man. Your father teaches you how to be a man. You follow in the footsteps of your forefathers, and you learn how to be a man to assume your duties and rights and responsibilities as a man in your society. And that has to be taught to you, right? That kind of thing has to be taught to you. But like everything else, the left wants to make it either or in these very strange ways. Sure, there is a genetic component probably to gender identity. There's a genetic component to all human behaviors, right? It comes up a lot in the context of being gay. People say, well, people are born gay. They're not born gay. There is a genetic component to being gay. They know exactly what the genetic contribution is because billions of dollars have been spent on it. It's approximately equal to your food preferences, and you're totally in control of what you eat. So there's just because something has a genetic component doesn't mean it's outside of your volition.
Yeah, your genetics can be altered by your environment. They can be turned on and off.
Yes. I think this is phthalates in PCBs. There was I've had the conversation with a lot of conservatives, and
you're bringing up good stuff. This is exactly.
Yeah, we've had people on. I think even James Lindsay, and I've talked to a lot of these people who say there's no such thing as trans kids, and I say I disagree with that. I think we've already seen the stories. There was a birth control that women were taking that resulted in their female babies masculinizing in the womb. And then invariably as they tracked them, they grew up to become lesbians. And they're like, hey, we just realized that this birth control was actually doing this to the babies in the womb.
Yes.
In the event the woman got pregnant, despite being on birth control, they had masculinized female babies. And so you take a look at the plastics. This is why we've been using glass bottles for all our water. We do have plastic bottles because some people just don't care, but I prefer to put everything in glass because you have phthalates and PCBs, and that's just a couple of the endocrine disruptors that we've got research on. So my hypothesis on this is, you had Bill Maher who said, why are we seeing so many trans kids? You've got so many in California, but not in Ohio. So either, what did he say? Either there's something wrong between the states or we're creating them or something to that effect. And I'm wondering if the reason we're seeing a massive spike in this is, I do think there's a social component because we've actually seen that in research. But I think another component of this may be that we've expanded the use of plastics. Plastic is over everything.
It is.
So phthalates and PCBs in all of our food. Then you've also had these stories about birth control getting in the water supply, can't be filtered out, and then people are drinking it. I think we are living in piles of our own filth in cities, which is making dirty water full of endocrine disruptors of any kind, and you're going to end up with people who are in the womb developing, and their brains are forming, and either through some kind of hormonal imbalance, some kind of chemical alteration through phthalates, a baby is born and they have an inverted gender identity that doesn't match their body.
You can't discount the social contagion, though. I mean, we're seeing like a 4,000% increase in girls who are deciding that they are actually boys. We're seeing clusters of girls all transitioning together.
And there are a lot of stories about people who have taken their children away from these school environments and their kids immediately detransition.
Correct.
And it's also very trendy in some places. Where my son had been going to school in New York City, trans was very trendy, and some of his friends were coming in, like one day they were furries and the next day they were lesbians, and then they were actually trans, and then somebody else was trans because his girlfriend was trans and she was a lesbian now, and like it was a whole thing. It was like a constant, every day there were like different identities going around, and it was very trendy to be part of the whole identity thing.
It's really empowering to get people to believe you're someone you're not. That's part of why I became an actor. It's incredibly empowering. And it's also, they love it. I love it. Everyone, and then you get paid for it. But then these kids, I think they just want that empowerment. Well,
part of it too, though, is we're talking about puberty, right? So Jeff, you brought this up. We were talking about puberty. What is puberty? Puberty is the process by which it's, development. It's the process by which a child becomes an adult. It's a coming of age process, right? We've taken away so many of the coming of age rituals. We've killed our gods. So, we don't have coming of age rituals in our religion anymore at this point in the United States. That's not common. We don't have a lot of confirmations anymore, or bat mitzvahs or anything like this. So what we have for our main coming of age ritual in our country right now is coming out. You can come out as something.
That's like the only American.
It's the American coming of age, right? It's our rite of passage, right? You come out as part of your rite of passage.
I thought it was getting your driver's license.
No, it used to be getting your driver's license, but now that's 16. It's 18 in some places.
They have isn't like quinceañera a thing?
Yeah,
quinceañera. That's like a
in Mexico, right?
Yeah, in Mexico, that kind of thing. I know that.
Is there a male version of that? I don't know what they do down there.
Well, you do like a 16th birthday party, but it's not the same kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, this is our main rite of passage. It used to be. I remember when I was a kid, and the whole everybody wanted to lose their virginity as quickly as possible. This was like,
but that's very different from like a bat or bar mitzvah,
right? Yeah, it's very different. But now you can go through a rite of passage of coming out. And what are the things you get to do? You get to change your name. You get to start choosing your own clothes. You get to dictate how other people are going to treat you. You're going to call me by this name. You're going to refer to me even when I'm not there with these very specific, phrases.
It feels like a lot of RPG video games. Your character will start off as like training mode or whatever. So actually, this reminds me of Maple's story, which I don't know if it exists anymore. But your character starts in like levels 1 through 10. You have no specialty. And then once you get to level 10, you get to choose your class. What are you? What are you going to be? And it feels very much like what they're trying to do.
Well, there's one thing. I think video games do play into the social contagion because a lot of boys play girl characters in FPS shooters, mainly because you just don't want to look at a guy's ass playing it when you go to third person. You want to see a girl's ass when you're playing, right? But
third person.
If you play it in switch to third person, you can play it, with a girl character. It's more pleasing to you. The other thing, though, you mentioned these PCBs. We can actually objectively quantify that. So the United States Marine Corps has grip strength data going back to the Revolutionary War. They administered grip strength tests at Tunn's Tavern when they commissioned the Marine Corps. So it literally goes all the way back to the very beginning. So they have the ultimate longitudinal data set. Grip strength among men today is 30% what it was 50 years ago.
Wow, no. That's
1/3.
rough. Not me, though. I got good grip. Hell yeah.
And
Actually,
grip
I play
strength,
guitar, so
it turns out grip strength is one of the best proxies, physical proxies for testosterone levels.
Wow.
So the Marine Corps won't even let you go to recruit training anymore unless you show up for a year of physical training to prevent training deaths. That's how bad it is.
So the handshake test, that's real.
It's a legit thing. It's a legit thing.
It's plastics,
I've
man.
heard that hanging is some of the best things you can do for a person, like hang from a tree branch and just
Well, that's
hang.
what the Marine Corps has you do. If you have weak grips, just hang.
Really?
Yeah, hang for 20 minutes before you get chow. You don't get to eat until you hang.
Wow.
That's what they make you do, yeah.
Well, sperm count's also on the decline.
Yeah, which is another great marker, a completely objective marker of testosterone levels.
This is the crazy thing. So if you look back at we used to drink mercury to try and cure syphilis. These things didn't work, but the hope was that you'd poison yourself so much that I don't know what they were thinking.
Yeah.
I can't understand this. Like the people would just die from drinking it. What made them think in any way it would help them? Or like, oh, well, the syphilis must have got them. But then we have asbestos.
Yeah.
And asbestos actually is fine until you disturb it. But then we started realizing, like, hey, if we're going to start clearing out these buildings and doing remodeling, all of a sudden people are getting mesothelioma. So we get rid of it. Now, here's the problem with PCBs. They've warped our minds. We are now as a society, in a delusional state. And when let's say a person gets hypoxic, you cannot save yourself.
Right.
That's why they say put on your oxygen mask before
example.
putting the mask on somebody else.
Yeah.
If our society has been plagued by PCBs, and you wonder why it is that you've got a divide between urban and rural, why the Democrats in the cities believe this and people in the country don't, perhaps it's because the people in the cities are gargling and swimming in endocrine disruptors that people who are on well water are not.
And I grew up on well water in a farm and ranch in Texas.
So what happens then is, as a society that is, assuming the endocrine disruptors are doing this, if half of the mind of our society, this body, has been altered in some way, how will you make a sound decision to correct the behavior? A person who is
I actually never thought of that. That's a great point.
Right, our minds. So it's not just this issue. I mean, it's also drugs and everything else.
Sure.
So it's like if you can't think your way out of it.
Right. If you were on a plane, the reason they say put on your mask before someone else's is because if you're all hypoxic, you die.
Yes.
If one person can get their mask on, they can think straight, they can save everybody. But we're in a place now where half the people aren't wearing their mask. And so when you're with your mask on saying put the mask on, they're swinging at you and they're in a rage and then just collapsing. You can't vote your way out of it.
Yeah.
You got to appeal to the gut. That's the only way. If the brain can't understand or is incapable from desensitization, you can get through the gut.
You know, we talked a little bit earlier about the depopulation agenda. You know, I have friends in Europe, and they always make fun of us in America for some of the crazy stuff here, the wokeness, the fact that we pay 3% on our own money, interest on our own money in our own treasury is bizarre. They laugh about these things, and I just tell them, like, maybe you should have some mercy because we're probably the most heavily propagandized population in the history of the world. The most sophisticated propaganda regime ever launched against a people has been launched against Americans. And they can't actually see reality right in front of them. They'll deny the evidence of their own senses. It's a bizarre experience. And I can tell you, running for office, talking to normie conservative Republicans, many of them actually still believe the Constitution constrains the government and that we should make constitutional arguments to restore the Republic. And you're like, Constitution has constrained the U.S. government in 100 years. Like it's a completely irrelevant document. Like, how can you still keep saying these things? And it's because they're heavily propagandized. We should not underestimate how effective the propaganda has been to warp people's visions.
The issue is you've got prominent individuals who make a lot of money just agreeing with whatever the machine wants them to agree with. So to go back to the oxygen mask analogy, if half the people in this country are inundated with PCBs and other chemicals that's damaging their brain or causing them to, just have alterations to their mindset, neurodivergence, as it were.
Yeah.
Then someone comes along and says, I don't know about that, but if I agree with them, they'll give me money. That's what's happening.
The famous observation that it's hard to get a man to change his mind about something if he's being paid to believe it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a very simple concept. But, the basic operation of modern propaganda is to demoralize people. But I don't mean it in the sense of making them feel bad. I mean to literally remove morals.
Yes, I was going to ask. Because people often talk about demoralization, and half the people think you're talking about low morale.
Exactly.
When you're talking about the removal of morals.
The removal of morals. Because you can't understand reality without moral reasoning. This is also something that Heidegger talks about. This is why artificial intelligence is impossible. Because moral reasoning is required, right? It's required to make judgments about the world, right?
But a big
I wouldn't
part
say
of,
impossible. I would just say it's not going to turn out the way we want it to.
A big part of what's been going on, though, is that the... no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
I think that in a lot of cases, the goal of, whoever's doing this is to remove our ability to make judgments.
That's right.
They want us to not be able to differentiate between right and wrong or good and bad.
Simply because they want the order to maintain?
Well, because they want to get their thing across,
Well, it turns out that discriminating between right and wrong is important to discriminating between red, white, and blue, falling down, going upstairs. Like, the apprehension of physical reality is informed by your morality. It turns out there's a reflexive relationship between the two. Well, and by removing this moral judgment, you can remove the ability of people to understand what's happening to them.
And that's what's going on too with the drag story hours and everything. Is you have kids come in, they look around and they're like, this is super creepy. And then the parents are like, no, this is totally normal and good.
But explain the AI thing. Why do you think it's not possible?
So what we're really doing with AI is we're doing fancy curve fitting. So, and we put a nice name on it, and we do all stuff, but what it is basically doing is curve fitting to very complicated functions. And it can mimic a lot of the decision-making abilities of humans. It can be really effective if it's layered, so-called deep learning, where it's layered. So you're doing essentially curve fitting on curve fitting on curve fitting on curve fitting. But what it can't do is things that humans do. It cannot look at its environment and make judgments independently about its environment. Like, one of the hardest problems in AI is to teach a system to just recognize a kitten. It's a notoriously difficult problem to get it to just optically recognize a kitten, something which a 2-week-old newborn can do.
What do you mean it can't recognize a kitten?
It can't. It turns out that kittens have a fuzzy enough look that's very difficult for them to discriminate it. But yet a child with the kinesthetic perception, once it holds, and remember, we're talking about 2-week-old infants that don't have object permanence. So when you remove it from their sight, they think it doesn't exist anymore. Right. That's why you can play peekaboo with kids, because you appear again out of nowhere, right? They don't have object permanence. So, you could teach a child that age to discriminate a kitten, but you can't teach AI. It's very difficult to do.
We'll get there, I think, though.
And one of the hardest problems is called the location problem. What if you just plop an AI down in a hallway and get it to recognize where it is, figure out where it is? This turns out to be extremely hard without the contextual information provided by innate human knowledge about the world. In some sense, what Kant was talking about, that there are categories of perception by which we structure knowledge. That's not possible for AIs.
Well, I think we just haven't developed the technology to get there. I think it's possible that, have you seen like the Boston Dynamics robot?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think you can put some kind of algorithmic learning system within it and let it mill about, and eventually it'll start discovering and mapping things and then understanding and all that stuff.
No, I don't disagree that it would do that. But what I'm disagreeing with is whether that's intelligence. So let me give you an example.
I suppose that goes to the question of the soul then, ultimately.
Sorta, but actually we can just restrict ourselves to just mathematical logic. In mathematical logic, there's 2 separate categories of research. One is called model theory, one is called proof theory. When your computers here do mathematics or arithmetic, they don't understand what the numbers mean, right? So it turns out that what mathematicians are actually doing is they're creating what are called formal languages. And these formal languages have 3 particular elements that make them up, and they've been thoroughly studied. Mathematical logic is like the linguistics of mathematics and studies these languages. They have one particular property that natural languages don't have. And that is that every grammatically correct sentence is guaranteed to be true.
What do you mean by that? Elaborate.
So if you follow the rules of algebra, you don't need to know what the numbers mean. You'll get the right answer. As long as you followed all the rules, right, you'll get the right answer.
You could see symbols on a page.
And know that was no. That's called proof theoretic reasoning. So we're just using grammar rules.
To simplify, if I understand that 3 as a symbol represents 3 objects, and you can represent that with, say, sticks.
Yes.
Even if I did not know what those represented, if you knew the rules of how the numbers played with each other,
you'd still get the right answer.
Yeah.
So that's how computers do mathematics.
Right. The computer doesn't know that 2 would be represented by 2 physical objects.
Right.
It doesn't know what 2 means.
It doesn't know what it means.
Yeah.
But humans usually do mathematics using model theory, where the number means something. In mathematical logic, a model is when you actually assign meaning to the undefined terms. So if you're doing geometry, you have points and lines, you give them some meaning. Say a point is a dot on a page and a line is a straight ruler on a page. You give it a meaning. Well, here's the amazing thing about formal languages, that any sentence that's grammatically true, just for proof theory, without any meaning to the terms, is guaranteed to be true in all models. So it turns out no matter how you define points and lines, if the axioms are true in that model, all of the sentences will be true too. So all the theorems are true. That's not true in natural language. So what the AIs are really doing is a kind of proof theoretic way of trying to make their way in the world. It doesn't understand the meaning of what it's doing. But that's what you would find terrifying about them.
I find the whole thing terrifying because I think where we're headed is, I saw an ad for a program that can generate any video. So everybody's been playing with these various AI model art programs. There was like Stable Diffusion. We did a bunch of bits on the show where we Donald Trump hugging Joe Biden, and the photo's awful and doesn't really work. But now you've gotten, what's that really popular one that everybody's using?
ChatGPT?
No, the picture generator.
Oh my God.
I use Night Cafe.
It's called Midjourney.
Midjourney. What was that? You just bumped us off?
It's because I took the mic off and I just hit the wrong button.
Okay, so
sorry.
Everybody's using Midjourney, but there's another app that can make videos. Now, obviously, there's a big controversy over deep porn, where that streamer was watching it.
Yep.
And so I think where we're going is, right now, what we can see based on the tools that exist, it is entirely possible to combine these things and say, okay, give me the scene. It's a bar and there's 3 guys and they're about to have a fight.
Yes.
You could create the AI models, then tell the machine to make this scene with these models, and it will. You will be able to write a movie and then press go, and it will apply the script, the character names, the description of everything.
I agree.
The script can be put in, and this is possible literally right now.
Yeah.
All we have to do is combine the components that already exist and are purchasable. You can then take an existing script file, name, description, character, sound of their voice. It's all in the script, and then the machine will render that for you. But here's the thing. That's technology today that we simply need to connect. It already exists.
Yes.
Where we will actually go is you will be sitting in your room and you'll be like, computer, make me a movie about cowboys in 1870 and they awaken a dragon and he's got to save his son. And the machine will just generate everything instantly for you.
Right.
The scary thing to me about how nightmarish it is we are going to, especially with Neuralink and VR, we are going to tell the computer, generate for me a world where I am the king and everyone loves me and I have to fight a dragon. And then you put the headset on and you go into this soulless, masturbatory fake reality.
Yes.
That's where we're headed.
Yes, that's where we're headed.
Yes.
Directly.
I agree with all that.
The question though becomes, what is humanity and what do we want humanity to be? And what do we feel our value is? And do we have a value beyond how we can entertain ourselves?
I read a great quote a long time ago, and it said, if humans ever shake hands with aliens, they will be congratulating each other not because they've overcome nuclear weapons, but because they've overcome the Xbox. That is, everything that we are doing as humans is to trigger our dopamine.
Yes.
You take a look at how humans used to live, and we talked about this with Jack Posobiec, I think. It used to be the norm that you would be out in the middle of nowhere struggling to find food, that you wouldn't always have everything you needed. Then we figured out how to basically isolate everything. So what do? We take pure sugar, combine it with pure fat, and then we guzzle it down until our hearts stop working.
Speak for yourself. I'm done with that. Don't. Yeah, I don't either.
I stopped doing that a while ago.
Thank God.
I mean, a dessert here and there is fine, but imagine this, that we've taken beets and we've extracted the sugar and hyper concentrated, that we took an orange, which is delicious and healthy, and we smashed all that juice. That one wasn't even hard. Right. So that what we're doing is whatever feels good, but it's just like we're just basically electrocuting ourselves, overstimulating until we die.
That makes me think we were talking about earlier about morality, because I think some people conflate morality and pain. They think that if it's painful, that means that it's not moral. But the reality is a lot of painful things are the moral thing to do.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.